Today I'm going to be replacing the OEM slave cylinder with a version from Oberon, and that's because my slave cylinder no longer works and the bike no longer allows me to put it in gear without stalling. So let's get into it. To make life easy for myself, I'm going to remove the whole fairing from the left hand side of the bike. That's the upper and the lower part, and I'm going to take the screws and put them somewhere safe and hopefully not lose the washers like I did just there. I just dropped a little plastic washer. All of it is going to be kept safe, so then when I come to put in this fairing back on in about a week's time after an oil change, I'll know exactly where everything is. Now that the 4 screws and the washers are removed from the top of the fairing and stored safely in my spray can top, I can move the handlebars to the left so that the wheel is out of the way, allowing me access to the inside of the fairing where there's a nice hidden screw that you wouldn't know was there if you weren't looking for it. Then I have a search around for the little pop rivet that's up underneath the light and get a screwdriver in there just to pop it off. And then just pull it out and again, put it nice and safely with the rest of my screws. With the front end complete, I move underneath the bike and have a bit of a feel around. I find the first screw at the back, so I begin to remove this, expecting a bit of a hard time, but it did come out nice and easily. And at that point I spotted this screw near the gear lever, so I took this one out while I was there. Then I moved to the front of the bike, expecting this to be the last screw to remove before I could pull the fairing off, which it actually wasn't. But this one was a bit more dirty than the back screw because it's underneath the bike, but I did clean it out and pull it off quite easily before finding this cheeky little screw that was hidden to the right hand side of the battery underneath the plastic panel. So I pulled all those little plastic panels off, undid the screw, and then the fairing came off to be stored away. Now with the cosmetics dealt with, it's time to start dealing with the hydraulics or mechanics, depending on what you want to call it. So I get some paper towel around the slave cylinder before cracking the banjo bolt. And as you can see, I did it for a reason. And that's because the fluid is leaking down onto the towel already. Then I can pull the banjo bolt out, give that a bit of a clean, ready to go back into the cylinder. And then I clean the end of the line, ready to put a little plastic bag over the end of it to catch any fluid that leaks in the future. The removal of the slave cylinder isn't an arduous task by any stretch of the imagination. It's just 3 screws. So I start off by removing the top left, then the bottom one, and then I move up to the top right, but I hold the slave cylinder in place as the screw comes out, and that's just to stop any brake fluid coming out and leaking anywhere as I remove it. But other than that, once it's done, it was just a case of sliding the slave cylinder off, and that was pretty much it. You can see I did have a bit of paper towel to stop it leaking, but that is pretty much it. It looks dirty. I don't know if it's failed or not. I haven't tested it, but that is it. The new one is going on, and you can see it is a much better version. And as you can imagine, comes with everything you need to fit it. There are 3 longer screws and 2 new crush washers for the banjo. And as you can see, as a comparison, the new one is billet aluminium and the old one is cast and looks like an absolute dog. So I'm looking forward to fitting this new one. Before I fit my nice shiny Oberon slave cylinder, I get to work cleaning the area with some degreaser and some trusty blue paper towel. That gets all the crap away from the surface, and then I can slide this unit in where it goes, and look at that, straight in there, no problem whatsoever, and it looks awesome next to the shiny quick shifter. So on goes the first screw, and I'll be straight up with you on this one. That screw is too long. It's about 2mm too long for that hole, so I need to grind it down, and I'm going to let the company know as well because that isn't right. So with that in place anyway, I don't over tighten it. I get the second one in just to see how that one fits. That one goes in nice and easy, and it goes right up to the point that it should. So again, I don't over tighten it. I just put it in, a little bit of resistance, and I leave it there before putting the third screw in. So with 3 screws in, I go back to the first one to see if that makes a difference to it, and it does go in a little bit further more, but again you can still see there's movement there, so it definitely needs a different screw to go in there. But that aside, the slave cylinder is on, so it's now time to fit the banjo with the 2 new crush washers. And there we are, going straight onto the banjo itself. You can see the washers have a little bit of a rubber seal on the inside. Again, a little bit of a twist to get them on because they are really tight, and the whole purpose obviously is for them to make a good seal. So I just clean off the end of the brake line, put the banjo in, put the other washer on underneath, and then I screw this little baby into the slave cylinder, and that thing starts to look good. We're starting to make progress. With everything tightened up, that slave cylinder is looking absolutely fantastic, especially in that silver colour that I chose in the hope that it would look OEM, and it really does next to that quick shifter. So the only thing to do now is give everything a bit of a clean up before fitting my favourite bleeding tool in the world. And then with that pipe fitted, that's all I've got to do now is crack that bleed nipple after pulling a vacuum, and then hopefully the bubbles will start coming through. There we go. And then the fluid as well. And then once I start pushing through the fluid with the clutch lever, you can see it's pushing some bubbles through and a lot of fluids. That's good. That means it's in a good position to move up to the top of the bike and start bleeding using the master cylinder. So I just pull a quick vacuum before pulling the pipe off the bleed nipple, which makes it easier because I don't squirt brake fluid everywhere. The next thing to do is suck out the old fluid from the reservoir, give it a bit of a wipe using Blue Roll, and then fill it up with some fresh fluid. And now it's time to repeat the bleeding process, but this time from the master cylinder. So I connect up the line, pull a vacuum, and then release the bleed nipple, which will allow the air and or fluid through into the pipeline. You can see there's a lot of bubbles coming through, so there was definitely a lot of air in that system, and at the same time you can see the fluid in the reservoir going down. So from here I'm going to keep on pumping until I get to a point where the reservoir fluid is down almost to the point of low, and then I'll top it back up, and then I'll keep pumping the lever until I can feel a good resistance on that clutch lever, which means there's a good bleed. Yes, that is a nice clutch for a change. And as I'm happy, it's time to lock up the bleed nipple, pull a vacuum on the pump, disconnect the line without spilling everything anywhere, and then I just top up the reservoir to the nice maximum level, and then I get the nice caps that I cleaned earlier on back on top, and that is my clutch bled. Nice engagement. So the only thing to do now is make sure that everything works. So I've got to start the bike up and then kick it into gear. But before that, I'm going to test the wheel. I'm going to spin the wheel to make sure there's no contact on the floor, which there isn't. So there we go. It's time to fire up the angry little dragon and hear her sing, and hopefully that clutch will work. And that is it, that's my clutch fixed. So the next step is to just do a full service on it, and that's it. And then I can start riding it. But that's going to bring this video to an end. Thanks very much for watching. Press that thumbs up button down below and consider subscribing if you're new here.